So let's start verse 3. Verse 3. Men who have no faith in this way, not attaining to me, O oppressor of the foe, Arjuna, return to the path of mortal living, samsāra. In the first verse of this chapter, Sri Krishna used the word yajnava, having known. And now in this verse he uses the word prapya, not attaining, to describe what happens when one does not attain to him. In the first verse, Sri Krishna said that after knowing the sovereign secret, one is released from all evil, whereas in this verse, Sri Krishna says that one who does not attain to him returns to the path of mortal living. We just have these two choices. Either, one, we learn about the Supreme Soul in his complete form and attain liberation, or two, we do not attain to the Supreme Soul and return to the path of mortal living. There is no third way and no other way apart from those two ways. Either we go in the direction of God or we go away from God. There is no third way. So when people think about going away from God, then this does not mean that God is not in that way, because God is in that direction, but only when we close our eyes. God is there as well. So Sri Krishna addresses Arjuna as paranpaha, or oppressor of the foe in this verse. Sri Krishna talks about this way of dharma, and this verse, and by dharma, he does not mean rituals. By dharma, he means the sovereign knowledge and sovereign secret. And these are the qualifications that he mentions, and he gives importance to these in the last verse. So this is what Sri Krishna means by dharma in this verse. Sri Krishna also uses the word ashradhana, a person who has no faith, in this verse. This is a verse worth understanding. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya says that ashradhana is a person who has no faith. A person who has faith is shradhana. So a person who doesn't have faith is called ashradhana, and a person who has faith is called shradhana. In the second verse, knowledge was given a lot of importance, and dharma was given a lot of importance. A person who does not understand this, who does not have faith in this, and is only bonded to the material world, the state of disorder, destruction, and the body, is described here by Sri Krishna as ashradhana, a man who has no faith. Look at the oddity in the minds of human bodies. The body, the human relationships, wealth, fame, power, etc. are continuously changing. They keep changing at every moment. Yet human beings still depend on them, resort to them, and rely upon them for support. Continuous efforts to make last that which is not going to last results in a person making arrangements so that he can last himself. A person thinks that if he gathers a lot of wealth, then he will have no worries. But will that wealth last? Of course not. Therefore, this person first uses up all his time to make efforts for wealth and loses his life there. Then this person makes efforts in order to make the wealth last and loses his life. Then this person makes efforts to make himself last, and these efforts are so puerile and so laughable. The reason for this is that this person has no faith in that which is steady, and because he has no faith, he makes no efforts. Ramanujai ji said in his commentary that such people lack the faith which requires eagerness for realization. A person should have this eagerness to attain the experience of God. Imagine that a wife is waiting for her husband to come back home from the office at 7 p.m. She has an eagerness to see her husband. She goes straight to the window to look out for her husband. She keeps thinking that her husband will come soon. She has this eagerness. The train is late. She gets a phone call from someone saying that there is a problem with one of the trains, and the train will not come quickly and will be delayed. The woman has to go inside the house. But she does not do that. She sits by the window. This is because she thinks that her husband may have been able to catch some other means of transport. She thinks that her husband may have been able to come back in his friend's car, or that her husband may have caught a taxi. She thinks that her husband may have known about the faulty train before, and therefore may have left early before any of the trains shut down. So she waits there. What is this? This is faith. She knows with certainty that her husband will come. This faith comes from two places. First, the wife has a feeling in her heart that she wishes to see her husband, and at the same time she knows that her husband also has a longing to see her. She is therefore not just going to sit by the window because of her own feelings, but she knows that her husband will come despite the difficulties that her husband has faced or is facing. She knows that her husband knows that she is home alone. She knows that even if the train is late, her husband will do whatever it takes to come back home. This faith comes from two places. Similarly, when a devotee has this eagerness for the Supreme Soul, then the devotee knows for certain that God will take her, and that God will definitely come. Not only that, but God also has a longing to meet her. The devotee tells God, "Lord, when I sit in front of you, I often feel as if your eyes are only looking at me. You like me very much, don't you? Lord, there is so much love in your eyes because you like me so much. When demons are looking at you, then your eyes would never be like this. But when I come and sit in front of you and look into you, then your eyes become filled with love. Lord, you like me very much." Now a devotee should feel like this, that the devotee has a partial reason for the compassion and the love in the eyes of the Supreme Soul. If someone is standing in front of a father, and the son comes to the father, then does the face of the father not turn towards the son? Then when the face of his father must not also turn? The devotee tells God, "Lord, whenever I sit in front of you, then I see much compassion in your eyes. Lord, I have found out the reason for this, and this is because you like me very much. So why don't you come?" If a person does not have this attitude, then they are ashradhana, a person who has no faith. Do we feel like this whenever we sit by God? Do we feel that God also has a wish to come and meet us? Of course we wish to meet God, but God also wishes to meet us. The moment when one feels like this, then consider that the person is shradhana, a person who has faith. Until then, the person is ashradhana, a person who has no faith. A person should be full of faith. A person should have an eagerness and an impatience to meet God. The sovereign knowledge is a form of the Supreme Soul. If I were to clarify it a little more than incarnation of Sri Krishna, it's the form of the Supreme Soul. If a person does not have any faith in this, then he will not get the fruits of knowledge. That is why Sri Krishna says that those who are ashradhana, a person who doesn't have faith, do not attain to him and return to the path of mortal living or samsāra. These people keep going around in this cycle of birth and death. Guruji will show an example of what ashradhana, or a person who has no faith, is like. A thirsty person comes by a lake. It's a big lake. When a person comes and sits by the lake, then he sees green algae floating on the surface. The person gets up thinking that there is green algae, and therefore there must not be water in the lake. He goes away from the lake and keeps running around the whole desert, because the desert he keeps seeing is illusions of water. He thinks he could see water and he goes running towards it. When he gets there, he realizes that it's nothing there. It's just an illusion. Even when he reaches there, there is still no water. Where there is water in reality, the person just saw green algae. And where there was no water, the person just kept on seeing water and therefore ran after it. One just needs to tell this person to remove the green algae, because underneath it there is fresh and pure water. This is what happens to us in the material world. The Supreme Soul is there, but there is this algae of Maya or illusion, and the algae of ignorance on top. When one removes the algae, then the Supreme Soul is always there, and the Supreme Soul is eternal. But we do not do the work of removing algae, and we keep running around wherever we see the illusions of water. We look for pleasures in objects, and when a person does this, then they return to the path of mortal living or samsāra. They keep going around in this cycle of birth and death again, and again do not remove the algae. We do not make efforts to remove these algae of illusion or ignorance. Kabir said, "The navel of a musky deer has a very nice fragrance, and the musky deer spends a lot of its time looking for where the fragrance is. We are spending all our time looking around the world for what is really inside us. How then will we be able to find it? A person should be full of faith. Faith is that wealth of devotees. How else can a person walk on the path of bhakti or devotion? A devotee needs only faith. This is because everything else will be of no use. Arguments and logic will fall to the side. All other supports will move out of the way. Only the wealth of faith will remain until the end. Guruji says that the faith is of three types. First, one should have faith in one's guru, or guide or scripture. In the Sikh religion, there is Guru Granth Sahib, which is the religion text of Sikhism and the guru of all Sikhs. Even the scripture can be a guru. A guru can be a person who you have faith in and whose finger you are holding. One should always have faith in one's guru. Secondly, one should have faith in the Supreme Soul. Thirdly, one should have faith in oneself. If one does not have faith in oneself, then what will one be able to do? Yajur Ved says that through faith one attains the truth. One who does not have support on this faith, strength of this faith, and wealth of this faith, does not attain to God, and returns to the path of mortal living. If a person has birth, a person has a birth and then they have to die, and if they die, then they have to be born again. This is the path of mortal living. A person is sitting in his body waiting for 100 years to finish, and when those 100 years finish, the individual soul will get another body. If a person is born again, then the person has to die. If that person has died, then the person has to be born again. So it's a cycle. In this journey, the person keeps perpetually tying himself with relations to place, time, objects, people, circumstances, etc. And the person's mindness increases. But in the end, these relations break, and the person keeps having sorrow. This has to happen, because if a person comes with a body, then relations will be created with this body, be it with objects, people, events, circumstances, etc. These relations are created, and while the person enjoys these relations, but when these relations break, then the person gets sorrow. The person gets attachment and mindedness, and therefore the person has further births. If this person does satkarma, or good deeds, and goes on the noble path, then he will not get liberation. This is because God will say later in the 21st verse of this chapter that a person who does satkarma or good deed goes to heaven. He uses up those satkarmas and then falls back into the world of life and death, and this cycle continues to perpetuate. Saints give a very beautiful example of Swami Ramasukdas. A blind man was inside a town that had high walls on all four sides. To get out of the town there was only one door. Otherwise there were high walls on all four sides. There was only a small door to get out of the town. The blind man had a walking stick in one hand and was touching the walls with the other hand in order to find the road to get out. The blind man walked around all four walls, and when the door came, he got an itch in his head. He kept his hand on the wall while walking around, but as soon as the door came, he started scratching his head and he missed the door. Then he put his hand back on the wall and began walking around the four walls again. Then what happened again and again was that whenever the door came, he kept getting an itch in his head and started scratching his head over and over again. He kept missing the door over and over again and started going around the four walls over and over again. Swami Ramasukdas said that we are all in this state. We keep going through 8,400,000 bodies of creatures, and when we get a human body, then it is an opportunity to escape from the cycle of birth and death. The human body is the door to get out of this town with four walls. This is the only possible in the human body. But as soon as the human body comes, then the person gets an itch for material enjoyments and attachment towards objects. People get engrossed in scratching themselves while consuming these material enjoyments and miss the door. Then they once again go through these 8,400,000 bodies of creatures. This happens over and over again. People keep going through this cycle. This sovereign knowledge is a medicine to heal this itch of the material world. God says that the person who has this sovereign knowledge attains to him. An individual soul is a form that is part of the Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is the ultimate state of the individual soul. While the individual soul does not attain the Supreme Soul, the individual soul has to keep going through this cycle. Until a child does not go and sit in the lap of its mother, then the child will have turbulence. The lap of the mother for the individual soul is the Supreme Soul. When the individual goes and sits in the lap of his mother, then the individual soul gets peace. Sri Krishna keeps saying this over and over again in the Gita and keeps showing us our home. Sri Krishna said in the 8th chapter of the Gita, Tattva daham puna janma nati memeti surjan gachanta punara vitrum apurna vitrum gachanti. And whoever at the time of death gives up his body and departs, thinking of me alone, he comes to my status of being. Of that there is no doubt. Sri Krishna says further in the 15th chapter, Yasmin gatana vartanti bhuya, those beings go to that eternal state. And he further states that that is my supreme abode from which those who reach it never return. Sri Krishna keeps saying this over and over again when that individual soul reaches the Supreme Soul, and then the individual soul does not have to come back again. This is the supreme abode and the lap of this mother. How can one attain this? Sri Krishna explains this in the very next chapter, which is chapter 4.